Okay, so very recently I was working on a deflector dish for my upcoming Starship project, and I came up with this really simple procedural eye effect. So let's talk about that today and how you can use it to create variations to the eye, like this creepy, weird zombie eye. Okay, so welcome back to the channel and hope everyone's okay. Big thank you to everyone who liked and enjoyed the last video we did, which was the transporter effect. We're not doing anything particularly advanced today. It's all shader node, so even though we've got Blender 3.4.1 up, you don't necessarily need the latest version of Blender, just a reasonably recent one. Anything, say, within the last 2 years should be able to handle this. If this is your first time here, then welcome. Hope you enjoy. If you do enjoy and you use these projects in your own work, or rather these tutorials in your own projects, then please do drop a link in your comments section below. I'm always interested to see how people are using these. So yeah, if you do enjoy this video, we hope you give it a like and maybe even a subscribe. And yes, let's dive in. First thing, if you are struggling with the quality of the video, it might be because YouTube's been a pain again and has downgraded the quality. So first thing to do, if you're struggling to read any of this text, is just have a look at your settings and just crank them to the highest level, and that should do the trick brilliantly. So straight in, let's get rid of our default cube and replace it with a UV sphere. Regulars to the channel will know that I don't like doing that. I like doing stuff with the default cube. So with our sphere, we're going to add a subdivision modifier and just give it a shade smooth. Now let's jump straight into shading. Zoom in there, and let's focus in on what's going on here. So we add a new material and we call it eye. Before we get started, let's get rid of the principal PDF so it just becomes a black spot, and go into your preferences and make sure your node wrangler is switched on. And that's on add-ons, node wrangler, make sure that's switched on, and you should be fine. So the way this works is we're going to use gradient nodes to tell the sphere where to put parts of the eye. So let's move out of there into the main slot. We go gradient, texture, put that into there and into the color section there. And we're going to do Control T and plant the object in there. So that only works if you've got node wrangler switched on. You can see there straight away that it split the sphere down in half, which is pretty good. You can also see there that it's kind of blended it a little bit. It's not an abrupt, sharp edge. Now, we kind of need an abrupt, sharp edge. So to do that, we're going to have a color ramp, and we'll plant that into there, and we're going to give it a constant. And the way to do that is move the white. You can see there now, it's no longer sharp edges. It's no longer a linear edge, it's kind of a sharp edge. So that's essentially our engine. And that's really how the whole thing works on this particular example. So now we want a mix shader, plant into there. First thing I'll do is it'll try and put this into this shader element here. You don't want it there, you want it in the factor. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a principal BDF, and we're going to plant it into there like that. You can see there that it's applying this principle to just that element. So let's give this the iris look. And to do that, we want, first of all, we want a Voronoi texture. I'm going to plan this Voronoi. Initially, we want to change it. We're not just going to put it straight in. We're going to go distance to edge, and then let's put this straight into here. You should see this start to take a, there we go. It's doing stuff. Next thing we want is a gradient. I want to plant it into here, put the color into vector, and this should give us some funky lines. Now, this is actually, I use this in another example, which I'll show you later, the cyborg eye. But obviously for what we're doing, we want it to be like a human eye. So to achieve that, we want to go into radial. We'll go Control T again. So it's on object, and we'll move that to 90 degrees. So there you go, it's given us kind of this pattern here, which is very eye-like. Now, to make this a bit more interesting, let us Control A, Shift A even, and add a color ramp in here. So all we're doing now is adding some controls to it. Move this over here. And as you can see, this is all very perfect. We don't want it to be absolutely perfect. So let's put a noise texture in between the two, into there, and we want to mix these together. So I want a mix shader, not a mix shader, sorry, a mix node. And let's plant that one into there as well. And as we change this, you can see that it becomes very noisy to ultra sharp. We want it kind of somewhere around here. On the sharper edge, but not perfect. Let's move this to one side, and then let's put a color ramp in there. Okay. Now, at the moment it's grey and white, so let's change that. Let's put some colours in. Helps if you actually click the right one. Somewhere up to there, like that. So that looks pretty good. So, right then, so that's essentially your iris. Let's just move this on. This seems a bit too much there. There we go. So, next thing we need to put a pupil in. And to achieve that, we're just going to copy the process we've used up here. So I'm going to just select all these nodes. Shift D brings it down to here. And I'm going to now move that socket into there. And this socket up into here. And what we're going to do is let's just switch that round. There we go. Now that just is a rudimentary, super simple pupil, but obviously it's not ideal. It's very abrupt. So we go for a linear, and that gives you this effect here. And I think that's really very effective. That looks pretty good. So again, you can spend however long you want on it. Not too large. In fact, that can be used as a nice little pupil control. If you want to animate it, put a control in there and just wiggle it or have it react to something. So you can put that to there, and if you move this in, you can see there. There we go. That looks pretty good. Like that. Quite like that because it kind of blends in and then out again. So yeah, it's little things like that, and you can of course play with these settings to your heart's content. That's entirely up to you. As I say, we're just showing the bare bones of this at the moment, and we'll discuss options later. So let's put all these together. Now, that looks pretty good. Obviously, now we want the back end of the eye. I don't know what the back end of the eye is. Feel free to comment below. Save me Google. Let's replace Google with questions in the comment section. So, what we want to do now is we want a principal BDF. And now we want to put it into this top socket here. So remember, this top socket is the black bit. And what I want to say is white. And what I want now is a Voronoi texture again. So what we're going to do is we are creating, we want some veins. That's what we want. It's never perfectly white. We want some veins around here. So let's put the color into there. And it looks pretty funky at the moment. So distance edge. Always deletes it. Change it to distance. You can see there, that looks, yeah, it's kind of right. But obviously we want something a bit more human. Humans are never perfectly edgy. So let's put a noise texture in here. What I'm going to do is, if I do that, you can see there, what essentially we want to do is we want to manipulate this. So if I just leave that empty, put the factor into random, that'll catch up in a second. There we go. And we can play with that. We can drag that down and just play with these numbers a little bit. And let's leave that as is. As I say, we're doing a bare bones here. We're not doing anything particularly fancy with it. Control T again. I always do Control T. I don't like leaving these nodes empty. Object. And we want a color ramp. It will catch up. My computer's being very slow at the moment. Okay. There we go. So let's play around with some of these numbers. There we go. Crazy. Now let's make that first one red. And you can see there it's kind of blended the whole thing in. So you want to drag this all the way down, so it's not so abrupt. You don't want it too sharp. You don't want it crazy like that. So somewhere between the two. That looks pretty good to me. Now, that's not a bad first stab. And let's put something in to give it a bit more detail. So let's give it some normal, and we'll use the same control here into height. Like that. It will catch up eventually. It's inside out, so you want to invert it. It will invert. There we go. And then just bring this down. There you go. Not too bad at all. Okay. So there you go. That is essentially your absolute bare bones eye. And this is, no matter what you do from this point forward, you can add more shaders, more controls in. But this is essentially the absolute basic layout. So again, you've got your iris down here with your pupil built in. Let's just have a play. Let's take a minute or two to play with this. The thing about B-spline is it. There we go. You want to kind of do that. My computer really is having a problem today. It's a right hissy fit with me. There we go. You can add a little bit of shades there. Add a bit more. Bring that right down if you like. Bring that back so it's got more of an abrupt edge. And yeah, just play with it. The thing about B-spline is that it overhangs. It's kind of, whereas linear will go, oh, this is 0 and this is 1. It'll go, well, I want 0 here, but then it will try to blend it off. So it actually isn't 0. So that's what you need to do to overcome that. So you need another black, and that will drag that right down. And we want that to be pretty light. It doesn't look too bad actually like that. And let's just bring those in. A bit more, sharpen those up. So bring those two really close together. And like that. And that's, there you go. That's your fundamental eye. And that looks, actually that looks a bit too harsh there. So let's go in into the bump. Zoom in. Bring that strength right down. There we go. In fact, you can bring a couple of other factors down as well. That might make it behave a bit more. This is where subdivision actually does help you a little bit. Can keep subdividing it, I think. Actually, I don't think it makes a tremendous amount of difference, to be honest. But yeah, that is your fundamental eye, and that's pretty much it. So let's just go through. That's your engine. Tells you where to put your iris. Remember, it's a constrained edge, a very constant edge. That is your. This is a bit for the veins, the rear end of the eye. So let's just crank that all the way to white. And yeah, then you've got your iris, and remember, it's this kind of radial gradient effect into Voronoi, and then you can play around with. Now we've got lots of colours on there. We can see what the effect actually looks like. Looks really nice there. It's not quite perfect, but again, not a complete mess either. So yeah, lots of options there, and that looks pretty good. Okay, so just before we wrap this video up, I just wanted to present these alternative eyes. They all look very different, but they're all done in pretty much exactly the same way, just with some very mild variations to some of those controls, some of those gradient controls, for instance. So starting from left, this is our basic eye, so you should have something not too dissimilar to this. This is actually an earlier version, so it doesn't quite capture that bump in the eye. We should put that in now, actually. In the middle, we have kind of this variation, very simple variation. It's a little complex, but it's actually a very simple, zombified, infected eye. And obviously, the first thing we've done is we've made the veins a little bit bigger. We've also changed that to yellow. It's giving it this very unnerving look. But obviously, around the centre, the key difference here is that instead of having a very edgy peripheral to that iris, we've actually added a little bit of noise and then some additional textures within that noise, so you can get this broken iris look, and I think that's really effective. Within the iris itself, we've actually taken advantage of an emission, so that really bright yellow part is actually emission control as opposed to just base color. And as I say, just play around with some of the settings, have a go, manipulate them a little bit, change them around a little bit, and you get some really quite funky effects. And obviously on the right, this is a bit of a departure, but again, achieved in exactly the same methodology. This is we call it a cyber eye. Again, it's it's pretty much just slight variations on some of those controls. So you see where we have the veins, we've got an additional control in there that blends it off, and that's a gradient texture in itself. Just blends off how far that kind of effect goes. So instead of it just being an abrupt edge, there's a bit of noise in there, there's a gradient in there, and it just adds a bit more. We've also got a little bit of an animation effect going on around the pupil and around the eye itself, just to give it that extra effect. And I think that's, as I say, it's just playing around with these settings. So start with the base, play around with it, change the colours, add some animation to it, and you can end up with some really quite cool procedural eyes. So anyway, that pretty much concludes today's video. So again, if you've enjoyed this and you made it this far, statistically you are in the 20th percentile of my viewers if you've made it this far. So thank you very much. You're hardcore. If you're new and you've enjoyed this, as I say, please do consider subscribing. We've got more stuff coming up fairly soon. But until next time, thank you very much, and yeah, enjoy. Let me know how you get on.